So welcome all to Parliament. I'm sure you were here yesterday. I heard about that. So welcome to our committee. Um, in fact, I got back last night and I was thinking about the last time Cordell was here, and I was the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I looked up who came: Peter Roscom, David Price, Gary Connolly, who had, I guess, unfortunately passed away, Adrian Smith, and Gwen Moore. And others, some officials also participated. This is Honorable Kaushalya Ariyaratne from the government. And we had a very good conversation. In fact, we all went on the U.S. Navy aircraft to Hambantota, the port. We visited the port, looked at some issues there, came back to Colombo, had several discussions. I think that's the last time we had a Congress delegation come here, and I saw in the little write-up that I got that perhaps maybe down the road there could be other congressional delegations that may be, I guess, arranged to visit. So just to give you a very brief overview, this committee consists of 18 members drawn from all political parties. It has a multidisciplinary composition. So, for instance, Kaushalya is a lawyer, Chitral is a lawyer, Nishanta is an accountant, tax person. He joined Parliament only last month to fill a vacancy of a young, energetic NPP member who unfortunately passed away. And there are others some of whom are in India. Some are joining on Zoom. Honorable Rauf Hakim and others in a delegation. The chairman of this committee by statute has to be from the opposition. This is the only committee that by statute has to go to the opposition, and that is for obvious oversight, checks and balances. And this committee is perhaps the only committee that, in terms of finance, looks at legislation, amendments, new legislation that deals with finance prior to it becoming legislation. As you know, there is no post-enactment review of legislation. So therefore, it comes here, and our committee would deliberate. Absolute majority of the time, it will go through. Only in very special circumstances we would send it back, and then they would revise and send it back to us. And in some cases, they would completely withdraw. It has happened a couple of times. We have, by Constitution, Article 148, Parliament is vested with the full control of finance. So, like I said previously, all matters must pass this committee and then the chamber. Our mandate essentially is to look at all matters of public finance. So, revenue collection, payments from the consolidated fund, meaning expenditure, then whether the public finance is being utilized in the way it is supposed to be utilized, then the implementation of the Appropriation Act. So in the budget, the government would say, look, we are planning to do this, and whether it is being applied in that way. Then a big component is to public debt and debt service, which we have not had the opportunity to go into until sort of this present committee. And as you probably know, we have new public debt management law, which means there is a new entity that is currently being set up, and I would like to, talk to you about that in some partnership possibilities. And all motions, resolutions, amendments to legislation that are routine. Also, certain instances we undertake investigations. We have looked at a couple, particularly a matter that we took up last Parliament was in terms of outsourcing of the visa issuance and so on. But very few of those that come our way. We have two major reports to present. One is once the appropriation bill is presented, we got to check on the assumptions. Are these assumptions appropriate? Could we expect the kind of revenue that the government is expecting? For instance, when we looked at this year's revenue targets, one of the biggest items is tax revenue collected from importing vehicles. 6 billion rupees, at 1.6 trillion rupees. And at the beginning, everyone didn't feel confident that we would be able to achieve that, but subsequently it appears that money is coming, not only coming, it's more than that. So these assumptions are based on previous actual happenings, and so therefore we try to get analytical help to do this. Unfortunately, we haven't had that analytical help. So these are things that we also want to raise at this meeting. Previously, we did have support, but for the last almost 1 year since this committee has been sitting in this Parliament session, we haven't had that. So USAID used to provide some help through NDI, and WFD, that is the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, the UK think tank. That's kind of an overview of what we do, and I'll stop at that and perhaps have a discussion with anyone who you wish to direct your questions at. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the overview, Chairman. And it's nice to hear the names Roskam and Price. Those are our former chairmen of our commission, and they were great members and great individuals to work with. We send greetings from our current chairman, Vern Buchanan, that Chase is representing, and our ranking member, Unititis, whom Colby is representing. As you said, there was a history, or a good history, of collaboration between our parliament and your legislative body as well. Because of COVID, because of economic uncertainty in recent years, that has been fairly inconsistent. And part of the reason why we're here now is to explore opportunities to renew that collaboration. So that it is nice to hear the overview of your work, but also we'd like to dive into perhaps some specificities of where that collaboration might be. And in light of the foreign assistance freeze from the United States, that assistance is also inconsistent on our end. But the good news is that there are opportunities for our commission to engage in some of this work. And so one of the questions I had was regarding the resources you have to scrutinize legislation, as it can be difficult to do that without a really strong research service or other types of assistance to do that. And also as it relates to an office on public budgeting. I know that was something that the Parliament is taking up, I believe. If you have any comments on that, we'd like to hear more, and then go back and forth if that's possible.
Sure, that's fine. Yes, we passed legislation in 2024 to establish the Parliamentary Budget Office. And we have now a piece of legislation to do that. We are in the process of hiring a parliamentary budget officer and a deputy budget officer. It is a high-ranked position. It has to be cleared by the Constitutional Council. We haven't still been able to get that completed due to various reasons. The Committee on Public Finance set up something called the Interim Budget Office during the last Parliament, which we expected to sort of dovetail into a bigger establishment. But those resources we don't any longer have. The Parliamentary Budget Office per se, at the beginning will be about a 20-person setup. We had made a structure on themes, and ideally we would like to have somebody with global experience, done it before. We've seen dozens and dozens of applications over the last couple of years almost, but we haven't really been able to sort of pick anyone yet. Like I said, it has to be done by the Constitutional Council, but this committee is the go-between between the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Office and Parliament. So we have a major role to play. So that's where we are.
Would the Budget Office report to you as chairman, or would it report to an administrative office as part of the bureaucracy, like the Secretary General's office? Or would it be more, or it's sort of in between?
No, it is sort of in between. It is this committee that will approve its budget, approve its work plan. So it is this committee that would liaise with the Independent Budget Office. And to the Independent Budget Office, any committee, any member would be able to, request various types of analysis. But it is for us, I believe, that it would be most useful. Now, I gave you one example as in terms of revenue collection. We would need a proper model to, put in the assumptions, the likely scenarios, do some sort of sensitivity analysis, and then determine what kind of revenue that we might receive, what kind of expenditure we might have to incur, and so on. But we do not have any of that capacity currently. So in partnership, those are the kinds of things, capacity building and sort of using technology, modeling and things like that, that we would be, with the concurrence of our members, obviously, would like to talk to you about.
Yeah, that's something that our commission has done several times over, the House Democracy Partnership around the world with other parliaments. And it's actually something when we were speaking with the Secretary General on the use of AI, that's becoming, it's recent development just within the last year or two, but it's something that we're now relying on AI to really help predict financial models as well as what is 0.1% increase on this. How does that affect revenue overall? And these models are now instantaneous. It's very quick. So using technology to do that would be a game changer if you're not currently doing it, and just make the work far more efficient and perhaps less assumptions, or perhaps safer assumptions, let's put it that way. And that's something that our Congressional Budget Office in the United States House of Representatives does for us. So something that we often do is we'll bring those experts from the institutions to other parliaments and have them liaise directly with your technical staff and with yourselves to make progress on that. And with that, I'd like to defer to my colleague who works a little bit on Ways and Means, our committee that does all tax and trade issues, to comment.
Thank you, Derek. And yeah, I work for Chairman Vern Buchanan, who's also Vice Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. So similar to your guys' committee, it's the Tax Writing Committee. And so we just wrapped up a tax bill. It took several months and got it through, and it was signed into law We typically do that, I think, every 5 to 6 years. That's the goal, at least. And with that, we use the Congressional Budget Office that is extremely helpful for figuring out, okay, if we're going to include this tax provision, how's that going to affect our outlays and what we take in, and ultimately help with budget decisions down the road. So yeah, I love that idea, Derek, of having the CBO come in and at the very least talk with you guys, even if it's via Zoom, about how they run their models, and they're really a world-class service that everyone, including the executive branch, will use their reports. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Thank you, Derek.
At the start of your remarks, you mentioned that one of the primary functions of the committee is obviously to conduct oversight, but also, you mentioned conduct investigations. I was curious, what mechanisms are at your disposal to conduct investigations and oversight in general, and specifically, do you guys have subpoena power to call members of the government in for testimony or attain documents or that sort of thing, or just generally what levers can you pull in that regard?
Actually, what I mentioned was it's very rare that we get into that because that's really not within our scope, And it is two instances that we had to get into. One instance was because the Committee on Public Enterprise was not established, and it was about us importing of crude oil, and we in fact stopped a long-term contract being entered to during the the economic crisis, which would have cost Sri Lanka probably billions and billions more. So that was one. And that ended up my being removed as the chairman of the committee because it's always political, and subsequently brought back in. The second investigation was also happened because it was related to public finance, but it was not brought to this committee, but taken through a ministerial, consultative committee. And we found out about it subsequently, and then we called them in, and it became quite a complicated affair. Currently, the chairman, Commissioner General of Immigration is still in remand custody for not carrying out a judicial order. But what we did was we looked at what could have been, and that investigation, I believe the government is looking at, and that ended there. So we have the power and the authority to call any person and call for any document. And then what we did was, once we completed that investigation, we sent our report to Parliament, and then through that, some of our members went to court, including the gentleman who is online, and 3 other members of our committee, Honorable Sumandran, Honorable Rauf Hakim, and Honorable Partli Ranawaka, who are 3 members of our committee, took this document to the Supreme Court, and that's how this matter went into the judicial process. And then we also ordered or rather requested the Auditor General to complete a forensic audit on it, which we are awaiting the report. So that's the kind of thing we have got into. But as a practice, it's not our job. Neither do we want to get into that line of business.
May I add?
Please.
Just to add to what the chairman said, now we have 2 other committees at the Parliament, Committee of Public Enterprise and Committee of Public Accounts, right? COPE and COPA. So they do basically those investigation matters now. When chairman spoke about the 2 particular incidents, the COPE was not established at that time, right?
No, the crude oil one, the COPE was not established.
Right.
But the VFS one, they bypassed our committee. They should have come
right.
through this committee.
Yes.
But they went to a ministerial consultative committee instead of coming to this committee. When we found out about it, we asked them why, and then the whole can of worms got opened.
But again, as a matter now, if we take some issue out and discuss it at the COPEF, in this committee, it can lead to various other investigation as well. I mean, if I say mention the BYD matter recently, initially pointed out at the Committee of Public Finance, but then it went into another investigation by the Customs Department. So it happens in other ways, but we do not directly involve with investigations. Rather, we look into the bills that come as forward-looking.
I just want to also point out one of the most controversial pieces of legislation approved by this government thus far is the casino regulator. And it was, in fact, this committee, it was only this committee that stood up during 3 governments that, you cannot let these casinos operate without a proper regulatory framework. And, now it got approved, but there's a lot more work still that needs to be done. So that's another, piece of legislation that we need to make sure is tightened, because we got FATF, we got anti-money laundering things, all of that, terrorist financing, all of that is there. So we need a really strong piece of legislation so that we can invite other players. Currently, we have a big player, Melco, but sort of big American players out there. Perhaps there are opportunities available if there is a proper regulatory framework.
One thing, so my boss represents Las Vegas, Nevada, and so obviously casinos and gaming are something that we deal a lot with. I just wanted to ask on the last point you made about Americans participating in the Sri Lankan gaming market.
Yeah.
Do you have data on that of like how many there are
Yeah.
and how much is being transacted and that sort of thing?
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to see it myself personally, so I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. But stayed at the Flamingo, the original place. But no, I did not play. I am not but I walked around and I looked at how this is done. I mean, there's so much money to be made, not just as gross gaming revenue to the state of Nevada, but also, I mean, the strip itself. A cappuccino at Starbucks would cost double the price, and the strip tax is very high. So the point is, there is a lot more money that can be, lot more revenue that can be generated by the ecosystem than just the taxes. So there is a large revenue component in there. And here, we don't exactly know the real revenue, because the current legislation only requests the entity to pay based on their own assessments a gross gaming revenue. And that legislation, which was overridden by the new one, is much more comprehensive. So as a matter of fact, we need to be able to monitor how much these people actually bring in, right? So unless we know that, we wouldn't exactly know what the size of the business is. But speculation it's in the multiple billions of rupees.
Sorry, Eric, just as a follow-up, because it's on the gaming issue. If you wanted to amend the law, could you explain the process for doing so? Because you would have to work with the ministry that has jurisdiction over this issue. Could you explain what that process is?
Yes. Now, for instance, when the original regulation was brought in, we objected to that because we said, there are holes that you could drive a truck through, right? So you need to close these holes. And then at one point, we were so adamant, the president, who is the former president, who was also the Minister of Finance, got up in Parliament and said, why don't you, the Committee on Public Finance, collaborate with the government to draft this law? So that's probably the first time that the COPEF was requested to be a part of a drafting of the legislation. Unfortunately, we didn't get a role to play in that. Our position was look at the best practice, and we said look at Singapore and look at essentially Singapore, which has a really, really solid legislation. It has the Gaming Act and the Gaming Control Act. They have two pieces of legislation. So it is in that context that we got involved. But as a practice, when legislation or amendments are brought here, if the committee feels they can do better, we would tell them go back and fix these issues and come back again. I'll give you an example of something that they withdrew is a bill on microfinance. The bill was supposed to cover as many microfinance institutions as possible, but the bill that they brought here didn't cover 70% of the institutions. So we in fact had a stakeholder discussion here. We've had some of those, not regularly, but we've had them, and those stakeholders brought up issues, and then we told the government, look, this is not going to fly. So then they actually folded that piece of legislation and they said, look, we will bring new legislation, which this government will have to now work on and bring. I don't know.
Didn't they bring and then people went to courts against it? That's what I...
No. What happened was they undertook to withdraw the regulation here, the legislation in the country.
Fundamental rights.
There may have been, but it was at this committee that they said that they were taking the Arandara, the Director General of Legal Affairs of the Ministry of Finance, said, look, we are withdrawing this piece of legislation.
I should have a quick follow-up to that. Is that the norm where you can go back to the government and ask them to redraft the legislation and they're willing to do that, or is that a one-off?
That was a one-off.
Okay.
Thank you. I had just a couple basic questions to level set on some institutional design. So first, I'm curious how appointments to committees are decided, because I know that, for example, everybody wants to be on the Ways and Means Committee in the U.S. Congress, and it's a very, very complicated sort of political process to determine who gets those seats. And so, obviously to some extent, you mentioned the background that you and many members here have, in the relevant issues. But I guess, for either for yourselves or your parties, sort of how do you think through which committees you wanted to serve on if you've just arrived to Parliament or something like that? And then secondly, I was curious about the sort of continuity of, for lack of a better term, perhaps the legal personality of different committees, because if I'm recalling correctly, you had the MCC format before the sort of sectoral oversight committees. Now you have fewer sectoral oversight committees, but also some like COPE and COPA, right, which are new. So in the U.S. Congress, right, we adopt a rules package every 2 years that sort of sets out jurisdiction and that sort of thing. I was curious, since you mentioned that by statute, you have to be a member of the opposition as the chair. How much is sort of things that are binding between parliaments versus things that are adopted at the start of each parliament, and then sort of when you have disputes between committees about jurisdiction, for example, right? How are those adjudicated within the processes of the House? So,
okay, I'll give you a quick answer and I'll let the others also come in on this, because it is up to the secretaries general of each political party to nominate the members to this committee, and as is for other committees. And this committee obviously is a good committee, quote unquote, to serve on, because it's very engaging, and you have the power and authority to sort of engage in real legislation, particularly when it comes to public finance. So if you are interested in public finance, then this is a committee that you would want to be in, certainly. The chairman is nominated by the leader of the opposition, or the secretary general, general secretary of the opposition, main opposition party, in concurrence with the other opposition parties. That is how I got placed here. In terms of continuity, it's funny because you don't want to be in opposition twice over, you know. But unfortunately, that's what happened to us. We were in the opposition, and I was the chairman of the Committee on Public Finance in the last parliament. And we expected to be in government, but unfortunately that didn't happen. These guys came in. So therefore, so we are in the opposition, and then I've been sort of continuing as chairman of the Committee on Public Finance. But in terms of jurisdiction, we have clear distinction between what we do and what others do. Like Honorable Kaushal has mentioned earlier, we don't get into investigations. That's not what our job is, you know. And so we leave that to Committee on Public Enterprise and the Committee on Public Accounts and others. So there is an understanding, but there is some overlap. The overlap really was between when we set up the Ways and Means Committee last Parliament. That had a huge overlap on the Committee on Public Finance. And so that needed to be resolved, because one of the big issues is when we call officials to Parliament, sometimes the same officials are called to Committee A, Committee B, Committee C, wasting their time. Right? So therefore there has to be an understanding among the chairs of the committees as to what these demarcation lines are, what the jurisdiction is, and so on. So it is not exactly very, very clear, but there have been instances that led to sort of controversies, and thereafter we've been able to direct our legislative services is also here. For instance, when that visa matter was bypassed and it went to Ministerial Consultative Committee as opposed to here, the officials sat down and said, look, you know, if it has anything to do with public finance, it must come here. So those lines were cleared and redrawn after we sort of, ran into questions. So that's how it is done, but I'll let the others also come in if they wish to.
Right.
Yes, please.
As the chairman said, I mean, the appointment of the members is done from the government side. It's done by the chief government whip. But permanent committees like COPE, COPA and COPF, but there are other committees as well, ministerial consultative committees. Those are not permanent committees, but the members are appointed based on their interest and the expertise, I would say. For example, I serve in 3 ministerial consultative committees: Justice, Education and Women's Affairs. But again, if I have a particular interest, I can request the Chief Government Whip to nominate me for another consultative committee. So that's very democratic process. If I don't want to be in a committee, again, I can say that I don't want to serve in a committee. I mean, luckily we never said that, because, you know, all 3 areas that I serve are like my interest and expertise. So again, about the jurisdiction, sometimes I'll tell you one example that we had a piece of legislation which we had to sit with the Trade Consultative Committee.
Yes.
Yes. So the COPF and the Ministry of Trade Consultative Committee sat together because, you know, it overlaps with the 2 ministries. So there will be some other, I mean, that is the only example I can remember right now. Yes, and maybe, I mean, I don't know, if the microfinance bill comes, perhaps we have to sit with the Women's Affairs Ministry as well, because that's something that women are suffering for ages in Sri Lanka. The microfinance is the issue. So probably like that, in certain cases, we sit together with other committees and take the decisions together.
Another one that I wish to bring to your notice is some legislation has actually originated from this committee. For instance, period poverty was flagged as a major issue. So we had a stakeholder discussion with the Women's Caucus, the UNDP, UNICEF, all of those people, and we proposed a piece of legislation from this committee. That was in 2023, I believe, 22 or 23. Is it 23? 23. And that was taken up by the government and turned into policy. And in 2024, for the first time, they started implementing it in school, not exactly the way we had recommended, but this government is continuing to do that. So that's an interesting piece of legislation that originated from this committee. So there has been issues. I mean, I mean, it's up to the imagination of the committee also, I think, to be able to sort of proactively do things.
Maybe one more. So in sort of your oversight work and how you are able to do modeling and sort of checking of assumptions now. I mean, you mentioned, for example, testing the assumptions around I believe a levy on imported cars, for example. So what would be your process for that, right? I guess do you sort of receive estimates, from the budget offices in the ministries, and then you can provide your own questions there? Do you audit, essentially what are the, receipts after a given point of time, I guess? What are the actual steps there? Decompose that for us one more.
That's a good question, and I want to answer that question in a sort of a detailed manner. It has also become a political football. For instance, you said you can't get these numbers. Now we are getting these numbers. So, I mean, what do we have to make those estimates, right? You need a proper model. I mean, I have a PhD in economics, so therefore I've done econometrics and things like that. So I kind of understand what assumptions lead to what kind of outcomes, and unless those assumptions change, those outcomes won't change. So you need to have proper models to work on. So currently, what we don't have are these models. I mean, for instance, sort of a large macroeconomic model. Now, for instance, if the government comes and tells us, look, this is what we expect, there is no way for us to say no, because this is what we expect. Right? The government works with the entire Ministry of Finance, which has 40 PhDs, and the central bank that has another 100 PhDs, right? And they have a huge base of analytical skill there. Here we don't have anyone, right? Which is really David and Goliath kind of situation. So therefore, it becomes very difficult for the Committee on Public Finance to really challenge the government. That must be the job. Whoever is in government, they may be in government today, we may be in government tomorrow, somebody else may be the day after. But the job of the checks and balances is for this committee to be strong enough and have a strong analytical capability to be able to question, right? I mean, the Congressional Budget Office may question, the Heritage Foundation may question, or somebody else will question. I recall, was it Ryan some time back, had a model that the U.S. debt is going to explode at some point or something like that. And then, it came from various different think tanks. Now, we have some think tanks here that do some good work. For instance, Verite, Advocata, and think tanks like that. And we do sometimes get their assistance to provide us with some sort of overview. But we, as a committee, do not have that expertise. Now, like I said, we had that expertise to some account because USAID and WFD did provide some of that financial resources for us to do that. Some committees had used that, resources, people have traveled and seen how it happens in other countries and so on. But we actually utilize all the funds to hire expertise to do that. So if to answer your question, which is very relevant to us, is to build the capacity, build those models, to be able to run sensitivity analysis. Now, for instance, the IMF said the dollar will be at 450 by this year, right? And the dollar is at 300 as opposed to 450. All the estimates were based on dollar being at 450. So when the debt restructure was proposed, all the international sovereign bondholders took a step back and said, look, we don't agree with this number, right? So therefore, we need to do a macro-linked bond as opposed to a regular bond. So in the macro-linked bond, then if you do better than the benchmark, then we also have to end up getting better deal. So that is how that MLB was structured. Now, for instance, we should be also have that expertise to be able to do that analysis and tell the government, look, okay, you're expecting this. What if if it happens, it happens. But if these things don't happen, this won't happen. Then what? Right? So I've sat in this committee, and seen how public officials, secretaries would have come and had come here and told us, look, our taxes are going to increase, revenue is going to increase by 50%. We said, no, it cannot happen. And then the revenue fell from 11 to 7%. Right? So these are two different examples of how one can go one way or one can go the other way. So my contention is that we need to build a capacity. So currently what we have done, Kausala, myself and Nishanta, we sat just before I left to the US, and then we agreed to hire, I think, four young graduates, fresh out of college, at 70,000 rupees plus 50,000 or something, menial pay for, I'm sorry to say that, but that you can't expect the kind of modeling that we are expecting to see, right? So even, and we are trying to find somebody to run this as a senior consultant, and we are told that we can pay 150,000 rupees. But in my opinion, 150,000 rupees is not going to be able to get me the kind of person who's worked in the World Bank or the IMF or someplace like that with 25 years experience to come and tell us, look, let's run this model, let's do this, and then get the relevant sort of expertise onto the committee. So that's something that we would, if my committee members agree, would be something that I would like to highlight in this instance.
Could you delve into a little bit more what the USAID and the WFD assistance was, when that ended, and explain what the project was?
Could somebody in the Secretariat explain that? Or?
Perhaps on a macro sense. But
Yeah. So
specifics.
we had, they paid for experts. We had people who came in and did some work for us on a short-term basis and on a continual basis. So we had sort of the director of economic research at the central bank once worked with us. So we got that type of person who's been in the IMF work with us, people who've been with the World Bank work with us, like that. So we got some top quality expertise coming on short sessions. And they also took the responsibility to hire for us. How many? 6? 4? How many? 6. 6 analytical staff members. They were young people, all of whom went overseas, went to Oxford, places like that, and subsequently after we shut down, and we had some really good quality staff, and they probably be paid about $1,000 or something like that. Not like big money, but something like that, so that we could attract that type of staff talent. I mean, I recall we hired this one kid who's finished his master's degree in mathematical economics from Oxford, and somebody who had a 4.0 GPA at Harvard, right? So that kind of people we were able to bring in, and that was helpful. So here we now have 4 people. We are looking forward to working with them, and I'm sure they'll do a good job, because not everybody is concerned about what they get at the end of the day, because working in this committee also adds to their CVs and to graduate school and all that. But beyond that, we want some real analytical skill, capabilities permanently with us.
Well, we certainly empathize with you, the jet lag that you might be facing, having just arrived from the United States yesterday, as we did as well on Monday evening. But we very much appreciate your time. If you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer anything or any comments you may have. But this has been very enlightening to better understand the real specifics, because sometimes these meetings can stay very at the macro. It's nice to get in the micro sometimes. It's also helpful for us to go back and speak with our commission and our members and our bosses and try and understand how we can better collaborate, which is something that we're interested in doing if you are as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to know more about the HDP and the commissions, how the commissions work, and how you have assisted the partner legislatures maybe. We would like to hear more about some of the success stories that has been a success with the assistance of the HDP, and maybe yeah.
Yeah, I probably should have led with that at the beginning, but I try to defer more to our colleagues here. So we're a commission, we've been around for more than 20 years in the House. We are speaker authorized, so we're not part of any other standing committee. We derive our authority from the Speaker's office, which in our system is great because that is the supreme authority within our body. So we have a lot of freedom to do whatever our chairman wants. Historically, the body has served to share the best practices of good governance. So not democratic governance, but good governance. So ledge side only. So the supply side of the governance loop. So in our mind, it's trying to make parliaments better. And by better, it's open, transparent, constituent-driven, modern, efficient, etc. We've worked primarily in about 15 to 20 parliaments around the world. It's a global portfolio, so anywhere from Colombia and Peru to Indonesia and Timor and Mongolia and Kosovo and North Macedonia, so true, and Liberia and Kenya, etc. So it's a global portfolio, and in so doing, we get to learn really great opportunities and best practices from those countries, and then share those with others. So we're an American institution, but with international expertise and scope. I would say that our parliament is one of the best in the world because it is well resourced, which you've mentioned several times. Having the resources means you get the talent, and we are very well resourced. We have a great CRS, the Research Service. We have a Congressional Budget Office. We have even just the Chief Architect Office, Architect of the Capitol. We have a new House Digital Services Office, which solely works on creating technical products, unified calendars, online signing of bills and changing edits and amendments to legislation. All of that's now done online as a result of COVID. So these are all products and tools and resources that allow our members to focus more on the specific policy. And those are really good best practices that we can share from our system. So I'm very careful to not fall into the prey of American exceptionalism. But that being said, I know that our parliament is very good at these things. When you divorce the politics and the partisanship from it, I mean, if you fall into that, then it's a whole different story. We're very probably similar in that way of the partisanship can be difficult. So it's process-oriented. It's really the processes. I'll give you a quick example, and one that I think we raised earlier with your speaker, which we were delighted to meet with yesterday morning. Was it yesterday morning? It was yesterday morning. On talking about ethics. We have a very strong ethics committee and ethics guidelines and mandatory trainings for all staff and all members. They're all treated equally for financial disclosures, for gifts, for what we can receive, for what we cannot receive, for how we can operate. And our committee is designed to really keep us out of trouble, not to get us into trouble. And so we work closely with them. And oftentimes, and I'm sure my colleagues do this as well, I will call ethics and be like, hey, am I allowed to do this? I just got an invite, or da-da-da. And they're like, yes, no, great. And then I go that way. So it's instantaneous assistance to help keep us out of trouble, because in our system, if we do something bad, it reflects poorly on our members, yourselves. And if our members do something poorly, it's usually our fault. So it's a direct loop of responsibility. So we worked a lot with the Kosovo Parliament actually on ethics. They went through the big step of saying that they want ethics guidelines, and so we brought our senior staff from our ethics committee to Kosovo to work with the Secretary General and some of the MPs on exactly how to do that or show best practices. North Macedonia, believe it or not, has a very good research service. We helped them over the years for the last 20 years, and they've really defined it as very well. We will bring North Macedonians to other countries and have them share how they've created their research service. Another example I've recently given was in Mongolia. They didn't have any public hearings in Mongolia. All of their hearings were closed sessions. One MP, senior MP, said, we really need to have these more public. How do we do that? It's not rocket science, but there's a process to doing it. We shared how we do it, how some other countries do it. Now 75% of all of their hearings are public and on YouTube and on like their version of C-SPAN, right? So wins like that. Updating the website in Colombia, how the parliament, they wanted to share how they vote. Their website wasn't very good at understanding how members voted and what legislation was voted on. We brought some experts from our House Modernization Subcommittee within our Committee on Administration to Bogota, and they sat down with like the actual guys who write the code of the website in media, and within 2 days the website was slightly reformed enough so that you could easily find out what's going on in Parliament. So some of these are very simple, nuts and bolts thing, and some of them are much longer, like the ethics, that takes a little bit more time. But it's quite broad. And you said you were working a consultative committee on women's issues. We work a lot on trying to promote more women to not only be in Parliament, that's the first step, but really taking it to the next level and getting rid of tokenism. We chatted with your Prime Minister yesterday a little bit. That was a big issue for her, and we were talking about how women need to be at the table of economics and security and military issues, and not just women's issues, right? So we work on strengthening caucuses like that, and in trying to bridge political divides. It's very hard to do, but it's something that needs constant work. So these are in person, these are Zoom, these are consultative. We sometimes bring former members who love to do this type of work. They can speak a little bit more freely, and they have the time to do it. So there's a variety of methods by which we do this.
Just, I want to add a couple of things here. Now, I'm going to go back to the question and answers, so the discussion we had. Now, for instance, on the tariff, the U.S. tariff policy. Now, what would be an ideal reciprocal tariff? You know, for instance, the only the analysis that have been done outside the government has been with a couple of think tanks, essentially IPS. And they said, look, currently with the existing MFN tariff, apparel is going to be at 36.8% and rubber at 20.2%. And they've done some analysis to show what the negative impact of that tariff is going to be. But if the tariff comes down to 15%, there can be a positive impact because other countries have different tariffs of 0.5% or 0.05% of GDP and stuff like that. So those kinds of analysis would be awesome if we are able to do. And then that way we can actually question government officials when they say, look, this is what we agreed on. Now, for instance, if they're going to agree with the United States on reciprocity, on removing PAL and cess only for the United States, then what's going to happen to, if it is soybean extract or whatever it is, animal feed, you know, how is that going to have an impact on revenue and, you know, subsidy payments for farmers on the other side, which is part of public finance. But unfortunately, we are not able to do any of that because we don't have the capacity to undertake that type of analysis. Another thing is currently I was in the United States, like I said till yesterday, about the digital services tax. As a matter of fact, that digital services tax that is being spoken about, that additional tax is going to be levied on countries that have digital services of American companies being taxed. That discussion started at this committee. And this committee gave directions to the Department of Inland Revenue. It was not a digital services tax, it was a GST, or rather the VAT, on digital services. The issue was that the jurisdiction of the tax, whether it was consumption or production, we were of the opinion that it should be consumption. So therefore, if you look at Uber and if you look at a local rideshare called PickMe, their taxes were different because of a VAT not being applied to Uber but to PickMe. Because Uber was being produced, or particularly the software was produced in Denmark and built to Denmark, as opposed to PickMe produced and built to Colombo. So I just want to make sure that, you know, there are things like that. Now, this particular one I want to make sure is not a digital services tax, right? This is a VAT on digital services, and that is not discriminatory against any American software that is being exported to Sri Lanka. The third point I want to make is debt service management. We are setting up a new debt management office. And my members know that I've been very, very sort of adamant that we get the right skills in that. I've been a treasurer at a large bank, and I know managing a treasury is no easy task. But when you're managing billions and billions of dollars of our liabilities, with bonds being traded and all of that, instead of just staying back and seeing what happens, we as a nation can participate. We have a new piece of legislation called the Liability Management Act that we passed in 2018 that has not been used, right? And to be able to use those tools that we have to manage our treasury overseas is a skill that doesn't just come like that. You have to have specialized people, specialized models. Not everybody understands the Black-Scholes theory. Not everybody can run a treasury. Not everybody understands how a bond is priced. And so therefore, there can be a lot of support that can come from, I think, your side to our side on that as well. So just those 3 points I want to make.
I can tell you I handle trade for my boss, and it's extremely helpful when you're able to see the numbers. I did have a question on the trade. I think you guys have a trade committee. Is that correct?
We have not a trade committee as such in Parliament. We don't have a special committee on trade, but if it is on duties and taxes and cess and pal, it comes here.
Got it. Okay.
The-
In terms of policies that the Trade Ministry Consultative Committee.
That's on trade policy. For instance, when the honorable member mentioned about how we sat jointly, that was on anti-competitive and countervailing taxes.
Okay.
Sorry, anti-dumping and countervailing taxes. That was a policy.
Mm-hmm.
But if they are going to introduce, say, okay, this percent or this rupee amount, then it has to come here.
So the agreement to the reciprocal rate, or what you guys negotiated down to, did that go through the Parliament, or was that strictly the?
No, we don't
government.
exactly know what was agreed upon, because the information we have, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have a 20% reciprocal tax, but we do not know what undertakings we have taken. So we don't know what the PAL says or whatever it is. We don't know that yet. But what we know is that it is 20%. That's all we know. Parliament has not been involved in that.
What about the VAT on digital service? Has that gone through, or is that?
No, I'm speaking here on behalf of the government, actually, not on behalf of the.
This is a diversion away from the meeting, and I'm sorry, Derek. I'm just kind of curious
That's all
on
right.
that.
That's all right. Let's have that discussion here. Like I said, what the Trump administration is talking about, whacking an additional reciprocal tax on countries that are going to add a digital services tax on American exported software. That is not the case in this case. What we have imposed is a VAT on digital services, right? Which means you're on the same footing whether you're producing it in Denmark or whether you're producing it here. So it is not trying to impose a new tax on imported software.
Okay, that's very good to know, because I know, like, South Korea has a DST that the Trump administration is pushing back on really hard, and I think it's an important clarification there that I'm happy to bring back to the Ways and Means Committee. We oversee trade, so that's a very, very important clarification that I'm happy to bring back.
Thank you very much.
Well, we thank you for your time. This has been really helpful, and we very much appreciate you coming in on a non-session day and meeting with us. Coming from the Parliament, we know that it's hard to come in when you don't have to, so we appreciate that effort and look forward to working with you moving forward.
You missed a live parliamentary session though.
By just a few, when was it? Recently? Last week, of course.
And then again, 9th of September.
Okay. Could you actually tell us real quick, how often are you in session? So for us, we're 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Yeah, every other week.
So you're every other week?
4 days a week, Tuesday to
Okay.
Friday, but in the budget time it's. Goes on for a month. Yeah, month.
6 days a week, I think that
6
someone
days
told
a
us,
week.
right? The budget
A
is,
whole month or maybe 6 weeks.
yeah. See, when we have budget, we don't come in at all, and then we wait for the day before and then go crazy on our budget.
And then we vote at midnight. Yep, that's how it works.
Great, yeah, we wait for the last possible moment to try and do things. There's nothing like a deadline to really push members into action.
The Mike Tyson School of Legislating, everybody has a plan and then they get punched in the face, I guess, is very much how we approach deadlines. We have the CBO and all of the resources, and yet, the politics is harder to work out.
And Christmas Eve is the best deadline. I think that's our advice from Congress, is you set a deadline on Christmas Eve and you'll get it passed.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you,
It was a
Derek.
pleasure speaking with you. It was really
Thank you.
nice. Yeah,
Thank you very much. And let's take this forward. Let's use this as a initial opening of the door. And let's also see whether we can have a congressional delegation like what we had some time back, and perhaps a local delegation also, maybe.
Yep.
And see how it works from there.
Yeah, we would like that. I think perhaps next year. It's an election year for us, and elections last a very long time in our country. So, but we'll see what the calendar can do, because we know our members would like to visit.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.